So I'd like to start tonight by reading the word that Jess read to us again, but in a different translation. You might have seen this floating around lately. This is the Book of Belonging, Bible Stories for Kind and Contemplative Kids. It's a resource that our Emerging Generations Worker page has found for us to use within our children's ministry, Lucky Ducks. And it's a really beautiful telling of 42 different stories across the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament that has a focus on inclusivity and diversity and representation. And I thought, in the spirit of our preaching series where we're looking at children's Bible stories for radical disciples, let's go back to the kids' stuff. So I'll just ask Vanessa to bring up the first slide. You might like to close your eyes while I read this story, or you might like to reflect on the illustration as we listen together. The people God goes with, the Exodus story. Moses ambled along through the low shrubs and tumbling rocks, following his flock and listening to the mountain wind yawn. Wandering left him plenty of time alone with his thoughts. Who am I? Am I Egyptian? Am I Hebrew? Am I enslaved? Am I enslaver? Does it even matter? He was a long way from home. This made him feel free, but also very much alone and unnamed. Born to a Hebrew mother, raised in the Egyptian palace, hiding out in the country after getting into trouble with both groups, he found himself in a lonely and deserted place. As he glanced to his left, Moses noticed something strange in the distance. A lone bush, completely aflame. As he approached, a voice came from the bush, as warm and commanding as the purr of a great lion. Moses, Moses. Here I am, replied Moses, awestruck. I am the God your ancestors knew, the voice continued. It is time we met as well. I've heard the groans of my people in Egypt. I see how they suffer. I've come to rescue them and lead them back to the promised land. And I'm sending you to Pharaoh to bring them there from Egypt. Moses sputtered, wide-eyed. Me? Why would you choose me of all people for such a task? And the mysterious voice seemed to smile as it responded, I am with you. That's not what I asked, Moses thought. He narrowed his eyes and whispered, Who are you? I am who I am, came the puzzling reply. You'll see what and who I am by how I act. God's voice resembled a warm wind, soothing yet adventuresome. I love you because I am love. I save you because I am safe. I comfort you because I am comfort. I am with you because I am here. You're asking me to speak for the people of Israel, but haven't you noticed that I stutter? Moses protested. Sometimes his mouth had trouble forming words. Sometimes they felt stuck behind his tongue, and all he could do was make noise. Who do you think made your mouth, Moses? It was me. Whether or not you think it works well, I will be with you. I will be with your mouth. Moses begged God to send someone else. And even though God believed in Moses more than Moses did, God offered to send his brother Erin with him to help him speak. I'll be with you and I'll be with Erin. Pharaoh has terrorized my people for far too long. And though he is treated as a god among many of the gods of Egypt, he is just a man, a cruel man, a bully. But I am bigger than any bully, and soon everyone will see that. I will show them through many wonders. So Moses traveled all the way back to Egypt and told the family of God, God hears you, sees you, and wants to rescue you and be close to you. And the people believed him and trusted God. We are not alone. God has come to rescue us. When I was in high school, I decided that I wanted to do childcare for work experience. I've always really loved working with children, and so I chose to do a few weeks placement at the preschool that I had gone to as a toddler, which was then known as the Royal Institute for Deaf and Blind Children. It was an organisation that ran a preschool for children who were living with and without vision and hearing loss. I was planning on exploring early education and childcare as a career, but coincidentally, one of our family friends was working as a speech pathologist at the centre, and she suggested that I shadow her for my first day. I ended up not leaving her side over the next 2 weeks because I was just so fascinated by the field and the job, and I knew pretty quickly that speech pathology was something that I wanted to know more about. I've been working as a speech pathologist for over 4 years now. Speechies have the honour and deep responsibility of working alongside people in some of the most human of things, sharing meals and communication. There is little more fundamental to the human experience than how we can connect in these ways, and this rings true across most, if not all, cultures. I have learned through my work that just as there is diversity in creation, there is also such a diverse array of communication modes and avenues. One of these is spoken language, which is often the primary mode of communication in dominant culture, but is by no means the only one or the most valid. For those of us who do use spoken language, there are a particular set of subsystems of speech that we use to speak. Speech itself is a really complex neuromuscular phenomenon that requires a very specific coordination of 4 of these subsystems: respiration, phonation, resonance, and articulation. So we're going to do a bit of a nerdy deep dive into the world of speech and communication, so I need you guys to stay with me. We've got the slide on the screen. And so we can see here that the respiratory subsystem, which is the breath from our lungs, we just sung that, is the first of these subsystems. We use the air in our lungs as the foundation for what we say. All of our spoken words start with breath. The next thing that happens is air moves up from our lungs through the phonatory system, which is where the voice is created. It's our voice box. That's not a super detailed diagram, but you can see that tiny little flat line next to the trachea in the phonatory system section, and that's where the vocal folds sit. So when we bring our vocal folds together, the air that we breathe out vibrates them and makes the sound of our voice. So we have breath and voice. The next one is resonance. The sound from our vocal folds travels further, where it bounces around within the resonant cavities and is moved out through our mouth and our nose. The last subsystem is articulation, or pronunciation. This is where we shape our voice into speech sounds to add more meaning and finally to create speech. So we can see that for people who use spoken language to communicate, it really requires a complex interaction of all of these subsystems. The whole system is really intricate, and things need to happen in a really particular order and manner to generate speech. I could talk about this stuff all day. I won't, though. But one of my favourite things about the way that we create and use speech is that it always starts with breath. Without breath as a foundation, there is no life in these systems. No air to vibrate our vocal folds, no sound to resonate and shape, no movement to be articulated. Everything starts with and comes back to breath. And while breath is essential for speech, this is also true no matter a person's mode or multiple modes of communication. Breath is communication and connection in itself, no matter how the final communication product looks or sounds. Thanks, Vanessa. So today's reading brings us the first mention of the Lord in Exodus, the self-descriptive paradox given to us by God, I am who I am. And the word for Lord, as it was written in Hebrew, you might know, is Yahweh. It is thought that the word Yahweh cannot be articulated due to its sacred and mysterious nature. Ancient rabbis believed that the letters that represent Yahweh are almost unpronounceable because they are the sound of breath itself. Yahweh, the unnameable God. There's a really early 2000s looking Rob Bell video that I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. I remember watching it at youth group. It's really like blue and he's on a subway. I don't know why, it's very grungy. But Rob discusses this phenomena and he brings us the question, is the name of God the sound of breathing? Is the name of God the sound of breathing? When we come together in this place to worship and sing, I often reflect on how important and yet also how limited our language is. We use the language in our liturgy. We have the language in our holy texts that's been flawed and translated by human hands and agendas. We have the language in our worship songs. We are forever trying to capture the uncapturable, to share our experiences and to share our love, to name an unnameable God. Our words are really important and so essential, but they will inevitably always fall short of the fullness of who we are and the fullness of who God is. And words, spoken, read, sung, written, are not always accessible. Many people communicate in ways beyond and around spoken and sung language too. So when we sing and move in worship together, I think of how we have all come from such different places. We have moved through such different, complex, full weeks before we even make it to the door and enter this space together. The words we sing in worship, they nourish and challenge and mean different things to each of us. And yet, despite this, we find unity in our breath. Each of us breathe, and often we breathe in sync with one another. You might have heard me speak about this when I'm leading worship before, but when we reach the end of a phrase in a song, the inhale happens at the same time. It's my favorite part of worship. I want you to pay attention to this when we do our next song. No matter who or where we are, our unity is found in breathing the name of God right alongside one another. It is not bound by the limitations of our own words and meaning. It is not restricted by access. It is simply holy breath. Yahweh. We are repeating the echo of a sound, a name that we didn't hear the origin of. Yahweh. It moves through and brings life to all bodies. Yahweh. You might have noticed in the version that I read from the Book of Belonging that Moses is described as having a stutter. In the NRSV translation later on in Exodus chapter 4, Moses describes himself to God as being slow of speech and tongue. While there doesn't seem to be enough evidence to suggest that Moses actually spoke with a stutter, it is likely that he did have a communication difference or disorder and communicated in a manner outside of the expected cultural norms of his time. In Jewish tradition, the exegetical hard word, just so you know, speechies don't always get it right. Exegetical, right? Yeah, thank you. Stories that are explanatory and provide background for Hebrew and Jewish religious scripture are known as midrash. Midrash uses story to propose how Moses could have potentially acquired these communication differences. Midrash suggests that, as a child, Moses placed Pharaoh's crown on his own head, alarming Pharaoh's court. Pharaoh's advisor claimed this showed Moses' ambition to usurp the throne and actually advised Pharaoh to kill Moses. Before a decision was made, the angel Gabriel, disguised as a minister, suggested a test. Place a diamond and a glowing coal before Moses. If he chose the diamond, it would show he was cunning. If he picked the coal, it would prove childish curiosity. Gabriel, intervening secretly, guided Moses' hand to the hot coal. Moses places it in his mouth and burns himself, leading to his lifelong speech difficulties. Regardless of the origin of Moses' communication difference, it is notable that the person who others would have perceived as having different and probably lesser communication abilities is the one who God comes to in direct conversation. And not only this, but the one who God places a direct call on to lead a whole people group out of slavery. Once again, we find ourselves face to face with an upside-down natured God, always calling the most unexpected of people to bring in the kingdom. The Exodus story asks us to witness a person with a stutter or another communication difference being called to be the one who speaks directly to Pharaoh. Moses is called unashamedly to the foot of the seat of total power. And it's not anonymous power that Moses can vilify from afar. This is power that he knows personally and deeply. Power that raised him. Power that would be likely very familiar with his fears and his differences. God is intentional and personal in this bid to liberate the Hebrew people. And I think that if we go deeper here, there's a really nice metaphor for change of the community and culture, not for change of the individual. There is no able-bodied expectations placed on Moses here. There is no miracle healing event where we see Moses' difference taken away in a binary before and after act. Instead, God calls Moses' brother alongside Moses as a communication partner. Community at its best. Transformation happens in community and enables Moses, as he is, to be a leader of a generation. The call then becomes on us to shift our expectations and values rather than on the person with difference to change themselves, or on that person to seek change from God as a demonstration of the strength, or so-called lack thereof, of their faith. As author, disabled scholar, and Shakespeare lecturer Amy Kenny speaks to the church in her book, My Body is Not a Prayer Request, Disability Justice in the Church, she says, "We, the disabled, bear prophetic witness about what is true about the fragile human condition, if only the church would listen to us." So it seems that maybe the church stands to be more transformed through this burning bush than even Moses. Friends, there is so much in these stories that come to us through our ancient texts. There is so much I haven't even had time to touch on tonight. So as we prepare to keep moving further into the Exodus story over the coming weeks, and as we wrestle with more of the complexity of an ageless God witnessed in these ancient texts, I invite you to join me as we hear again some questions from our excerpt of the Book of Belonging. Moses asked himself, "Who am I? Am I Egyptian? Am I Hebrew? Am I enslaved? Am I enslaver?" How may we too be transformed by the burning bush, the breath of the ancient God, Yahweh?